I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and behind me is the Kia Sorento. And while a facelift is on the way for the Sorento, I thought we'd take one last look at the pre-facelift version of one of the most accomplished three-row family SUVs on the market here in Australia. It can also be one of the best value depending on specification, especially the one behind me, which is actually the Base S diesel all-wheel drive, one of the most affordable Sorrentos. The value does dilute a little bit as you start to move up the Sorento range, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the range as a whole and where you can find a couple of sweet spots, including in the GT line, the most fancy version of the Sorento. I'll take you through the 4 variants and the 4 engines that also include 2 hybrids and whether or not they make sense to join the waitlist for, because they do have extensive wait times. But before we get started, hit subscribe down below. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. It says a lot about the underlying quality of a vehicle when even the base model is a pleasant place to spend time. It's where the base model is fairly awful and a little bit of tinsel is put on top where we start to sense that perceived quality is a bit poor. That's not the case with the Sorento. Now I'm sitting in the S, the cheapest possible Sorento, and even this is relatively livable, even if in fridge white it does come off as a bit rental car. We're sitting on supportive cloth seats that even have quite a nice little tweed-esque detail through them, lifting it up off that kind of rental car spec of seat. And we have a leather steering wheel on all grades, which is good to see. Plus, even the base infotainment package is impressive, and oddly, the base Sorento is the only variant to get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto because it doesn't have built-in navigation. That is a quirk that Kia will very likely fix on the facelift Sorento. But if you go for a higher grade, they get a bigger screen, which is awesome. The screen fills out this bezel properly, but they gain navigation and lose wireless smartphone mirroring. You have to plug your phone in with a cable in order to mirror its software on the screen. Also in the Sorento S, you get air conditioning with physical knobs as opposed to toggles, which is an upgrade in higher versions of this car. Looking forward, we have analog gauges in this grade with a color screen in between them, but again, if you move further up the range in the Sorento, you can get a large, fully digital instrument cluster with camera-based blind spot monitoring too. But the way it's set out here works perfectly fine, and the software itself is intuitive, and even the bass stereo sounds fairly decent in the Sorento S, and the air conditioning blows very cold. Material quality is a strong point. We have nice soft cosseting materials virtually everywhere you touch here in the Sorento, and it does feel like a vehicle which has been built well. This has been a thoroughly tested press car, this one, and everything still feels very well screwed together and tight, which is a good sign. And in terms of storage, it is plentiful. Lots down here ahead of the shifter with 3 USB ports, big cup holders, a large deep bin between the seats, and okay size door bins, but they still can't fit a really big water bottle. So that's the front seat, a very pleasant place to spend time. Let's check out the second row. The second row of the Sorento is another strong point for this car. If you're using it as a 2-row vehicle with a big boot and you don't need that 3rd row in the back, then you can push the chairs all the way to the rear, as I have done here, and legroom is phenomenal, headroom's excellent, and tow room is awesome too. Plus the amenities are decent. We've got air vents here in the center, we've got a 12-volt socket and another USB port as well, plus seat back elasticated pockets, cup holders in the doors, and all of those high quality materials continue here in the second row too, so Kia didn't forget about comfort for those in the back. Plus, you get a nice flip down armrest. All in all, an easier vehicle to do a long road trip of in the back. But if you do need to seat people in that 3rd row, you are going to need to bring these seats a little bit forward if you want to ensure they have legroom. But even so, even if I bring this seat halfway forward, maybe even more than halfway, I still actually do have like a mid-size SUV's worth of legroom back here, which is really impressive. Getting into the 3rd row of an SUV is usually easy enough for us adults, but for little kids it could actually be a chore if the seat is very heavy. Kia has done them a bit of a favor by including an electromechanical release switch, which you just press and the seat moves out of the way, which is good. Here in the 3rd row of the Sorento, once I've adjusted the middle row into the position I showed you just a moment ago, you can see you actually can fit adults back here. At 6 foot again, still 6 foot, headroom still fine. Legroom is good, even though my legs are at this horribly compromised position because the seat base is so low. So would I want to be back here for hours? No, but in a pinch, taking a group of people to a soccer game or a concert, the Sorento would be absolutely fine for 7 people, which is nice flexibility to have. You do get some storage back here as well, but not dedicated air vents. And it is worth keeping in mind that, like the Hyundai Santa Fe, the Kia Sorento's curtain airbags only extend to the glass back here, not to the body, which is something that could be improved in the next generation version of this car. But in terms of space, it's pretty good. I'm a big fan of the rear end styling of the Sorento, in particular the split tail light and indicator, which actually sits on the inner of the 2 lights. It's a little bit 70s Americana. I think it works. Now, the base model has a manual tailgate, but that does become electric when you start moving up the range, and it reveals a decent size boot. Now, erecting the 3rd row seat is an easy job. It's manual. You just lean in, and the seats themselves are pretty light. Nothing to it. Now, when you do have 3 rows in place, your boot space is fairly minimal, under 200 litres. You will still get a small amount of grocery shopping or maybe some sports bags or something back there, but it's really, really minimal. You'll need to go for a bigger car if you want to have 7 passengers and lots of cargo. But you can see some smart thinking. Kia does have a place to stow the cargo blind, even when you are using the 7 seats. Dropping them down is nice and easy too. And then underneath here, you've got a bit more storage. And then beneath the vehicle, you've actually got a full-size underslung spare wheel, which gives you lots of confidence for country touring. The running costs of the Sorento will really depend on which engine you choose. The diesel here is very good on fuel, but a bit more expensive to service. And compared to Kia's 6.3 litre per 100 Ks claim, that is doable on the highway. In town, you'll see maybe 7.5 or 8, still very good for a vehicle of this size. Conversely, the petrol V6 is a lot cheaper to buy, but a lot more expensive at the pump. That said, if you're only planning to keep a Sorento for a few years, the petrol V6 could still end up saving you money overall. Then there are the hybrids, the standard series parallel hybrid and a plug-in hybrid, both of which are more expensive and harder to get your hands on, but they're both worth a look, particularly if you're going to keep the vehicle for a little bit longer. Now, the warranty is 7 years, unlimited kilometers on the vehicle, or 8 years on the high voltage components for those hybrid motors. When it comes to insurance, everybody's situation varies and your premium will vary based on things insurers take into account, like where you live, your driving history, and how you garage the car. So what is the Kia Sorento like to drive? Well, it's just about as good as it was when this generation came out, with a full Australian ride and handling tune, which really suits the character of this vehicle and manages to imbue the Sorento with a really nice blend of comfort and good body control on a country road. And I think Kia pretty much nailed that balance out of the gate. The related Hyundai Santa Fe needed a few adjustments before it felt about right in terms of ride quality and handling, but the Sorento, yeah, it's good in town and it's good in the country, and it's nice and settled and quiet on the freeway as well. Now, there can be a bit of a refinement difference depending on the engine that you go for. I've got the 2.2 litre turbo diesel 4-cylinder here that makes 148 kilowatts of power and 440 Newton meters of torque, which is a good amount of torque, and it does mean that the revs can be kept relatively low most of the time, which limits the amount of noise coming into the cabin. But when you do need to overtake on a country road or on the highway, when it starts to rev, you definitely know that it is a diesel 4-cylinder. And by comparison, the petrol V6, which is quite a bit thirstier, does make a more pleasant sound when you do have to rev it. But you have to rev the petrol V6 a lot more because it has a lot less go. The nice compromise are the hybrids. The turbo petrol hybrid has a good amount of power and it's very efficient, about as efficient as the diesel. So if you can get your hands on one of those and you do intend to keep the car for a while in order to recoup the additional purchase outlay, the hybrid is a really nice solution. The plug-in hybrid, even better for people who have a commute and the ability to charge the car at either end of that commute in order to run on zero tailpipe emissions and very cheap energy. But at over 80 grand, it's certainly not a cheap car to buy compared to the petrol or the diesel in particular. But as a suite of engines, the Sorento lineup is pretty good. You can't actually go that wrong no matter which one you choose. Equally, when it comes to the handling, you will find that the Sorento has the control and the compliance that you look for on a typical Australian B road, which can be technical and broken up in terms of the tarmac quality. The car, you know it's a 3-row, 7-seat SUV, but it does hold itself together in a way that some rivals don't, all while delivering ride comfort that lets you know what's going on the road surface, but never crashes through to the cabin. Now, we don't have adaptive dampers or fancy technology like that here to let you have a sportier or plusher ride depending on your tastes, but the tune that sits in the suspension, the One Tune, is a pretty good one, especially here on the base model, which has massively chunky tires, which also helps to soak up the bumps. Problems with the Sorento are fairly few and far between. The hybrids and also the diesel do use dual clutch transmissions, but the one in the diesel is pretty good. Kia shares it with Hyundai N, for instance, and a lot of money was spent making sure this transmission was going to be very smooth, and at low speeds it avoids some of the foibles that dual clutch automatics are known for. And on the whole, I don't think it's a demerit of the vehicle, it's just perhaps not quite as smooth as the torque converter automatic that you get in the petrol V6 version of this car. When it comes to safety features, the Sorento is pretty good. Its lane centering is fairly smooth, the adaptive cruise control works well, we do have blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert standard even from the base model, but you will want to go for a higher spec vehicle, particularly a GT line which has blind spot cameras, if you want to max out the safety technology on the Kia Sorento. So that's a comprehensive look at the Kia Sorento before it gets its big midlife facelift. Can I tell you a secret? I actually think the pre-facelift version looks more handsome. So if I was thinking about it, I'd probably try and buy this one before it gets replaced. In terms of my recommendation, I think the diesel is still the best all-round powertrain, especially for families looking to keep this vehicle for 5+ years. If you're thinking less than that, the petrol V6 is still a really good buy, and the petrol hybrid is also a really interesting powertrain to consider if you're not really sure whether your commitment will be short or long term, because I think its residuals will probably be relatively strong. That's my guess. Now, in terms of spec, something like a petrol V6 GT line is still really good value, but if you are looking for a diesel, I'd probably look somewhere in that Sport Plus kind of range, which is going to save you a little bit of money compared to a top-end vehicle. Those are my opinions on this accomplished 7-seat SUV. However, I'm very keen to know yours, so please let me know down below in the comments. While you're there, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.